A lolcow, combining LOL or laugh out loud with cow, is internet slang for someone who can be milked for laughs at their own expense. In practice, it refers to an individual made into an online laughingstock, often without fully realizing it. These are people who attract audiences because onlookers find their behavior unintentionally funny or cringeworthy, not out of genuine fandom. Crucially, the lolcow usually isn't in on the joke. They may even think the attention means they're admired, confusing mockery for genuine support. Unfortunately, there's a disturbing trend behind this phenomenon. A significant number of these lolcow figures are vulnerable individuals, people with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities or other mental illnesses. Over and over, the internet discovers an eccentric or troubled personality, and a pile-on ensues. Trolls and so-called fans will encourage the person to engage in outrageous, self-destructive antics, all for entertainment. In a lot of cases, onlookers even egg them into harm's way, prompting them to self-harm, indulge addictions, or wreak havoc in public, simply because an audience finds someone else's pain, misery, and struggle entertaining. Misleading praise and relentless dares create a vicious cycle for these individuals. The lolcow chases approval they think is real, while the audience pushes them further over the edge for laughs. So why do people participate in this? The appeal is morbidly simple. Misery loves company. Troll communities feed off the negative drama and thrive off the struggles of others, finding a perverse sense of satisfaction in watching someone's life derail. It's addictive content, a real-life train wreck you can't look away from, and platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and dedicated forums make it easy to gawk at. But unlike typical stars that go viral who might actually be uplifted by fans, lolcow audiences do the exact opposite. They actively pressure the person into more impulsive or erratic behavior. Today's cheers turn into tomorrow's mockery as communities oscillate between fake support and outright harassment, keeping the lolcow perpetually off balance. What's especially troubling is how a whole economy has formed around milking lolcows. Views and clicks translate to money, and a network of content creators has sprung up to supply the demand for lolcow drama. Entire forums like the notorious Kiwi Farms and countless subreddit or Discord groups are devoted to tracking lolcow antics. Kiwi Farms in particular became infamous. It started as a site to catalog the life of one early lolcow, more on him later, and now deems itself as a community, discussing eccentric people who voluntarily make fools of themselves. Absolute bullshit. In reality, many of their targets don't volunteer for the abuse they get. They're often people lacking the social awareness to realize how they appear, or they're lacking the coping skills to handle life in general, much less thousands of people actively messing with them. What started as a small phenomenon on lucrative forums or Reddit posts or Discords, on YouTube, commentary channels have turned lolcow content into a lucrative genre. Creators like Turkey Tom, Smokey McC, and Kiwi Tapes routinely produce lolcow documentaries or reaction videos that highlight the most humiliating moments of these individuals' lives. They morally grandstand about their subjects' flaws, painting lolcows as horrible people whose antics deserve exposure, but their comments mirror high school bullies targeting the special needs kid for a laugh. There's even a grotesque sense of spectacle. Like Kiwi Tapes and his associate Smokey McC both post videos regularly documenting these people and host a degenerate live stream where they sit around and make fun of lolcows. These YouTubers often collaborate and share info. The tone of this content is self-congratulatory. These creators act like intrepid investigators or vigilantes exposing the misdeeds of the lolcow. But in all actuality, they're just getting paid to harass a complete stranger online just because that person is different or unattractive to them. It's bullying for profit, thinly cloaked as internet journalism or justice. To be fair though, not every so-called lolcow is mentally disabled or innocent. There are some exceptions where relatively mainstream but disliked figures get this label. For example, certain controversial gaming streamers or vloggers with no diagnosed disabilities have been dubbed lolcows after repeated public meltdowns. The dark side Phils or wings of redemptions of the internet are mocked largely for their behavior and attitude, not a cognitive impairment. But those cases only prove the rule. When a person isn't particularly vulnerable, trolls usually just call them idiots or scumbags and move on. It's the truly vulnerable individuals, those with autism, schizophrenia, intellectual delays, severe trauma, or who knows what, are those that become long-term lolcow targets, precisely because they're easy to provoke and less equipped to defend themselves. If these people weren't mentally ill or impaired, they'd likely just be widely hated for any bad behavior, not endlessly exploited as an ongoing clown show. The cruel truth is that lolcow farmers pick the low-hanging fruit. They target people who can't fully fight back or comprehend the game, and then they milk them under the pretense of documenting bad behavior. Let's look at a few specific cases, some of the internet's most notorious lolcows, just to see how this pattern plays out in practice and how tragic it can become. One of TikTok's recent cautionary tales is Joshua Block, also known by his handle World of T-Shirts. Josh started out as a quirky, geeky kid from Long Island who loved making upbeat dancing videos. By 2020, at around age 19 or 20, he had gained millions of followers filming himself singing and dancing at tourist spots. A wholesome, somewhat awkward local celebrity. Notably, Josh is on the autism spectrum, and in high school, he had actually thrived with a supportive network and family. He was an honor roll student and even a track athlete, defying the low expectations some had for him back then. Back then, his innocent, almost childlike enthusiasm was part of the charm. As his grandfather said, Josh is himself, he does it all alone. Proud that his autistic grandson was fearlessly putting himself out there. However, once Josh became an adult, darker influences seeped in. The same addictive personality that led him to chug the boba and coffee on camera. It was harmless fun back then. Made him an easy mark once he turned 21 and discovered alcohol. His content shifted to partying and binge drinking in New York bars and streets, often on live stream. Instead of cautioning him, much of his online audience cheered this behavior on. Viewers would actually encourage Josh's excessive drinking to see what wild, outrageous things he might do on camera next. In effect, internet strangers were treating him like a wind-up toy. The drunker Josh got, the more extreme and entertaining his behavior came to them, so they kept pushing it. Josh had no one positive looking out for his well-being. His mother had died of cancer when he was in his teens, and his father, who also struggled with addiction, was out of the picture. He lived with his grandparents, but once he was roaming Manhattan making videos, the internet became his main social circle. Sensing this vulnerability like some sort of sick vultures, some opportunists deemed Josh as handlers even leeched onto him in real life. A middle-aged man named Michael Quinn began hanging out with Josh during his bar crawls, ostensibly as a friend, but in reality, Quinn was exploiting Joshua's alcoholism for clout and money. Quinn would appear in Joshua's live streams and videos, buying rounds of drinks or facilitating stunts, all the while growing his own online following from the spectacle. Quinn financially benefited by promoting himself and even directly using Josh's meltdowns as content. Let's just say many of Josh's genuine fans have accused Quinn of not having his best interests at heart, to put it mildly. Whole forums began to spring up to discuss and monitor his every move. There's a subreddit with thousands of members dedicated to just World of T-Shirts gossip. The commentators in those circles share each new incident. Joshua passing out on a subway, Josh vomiting in public, Josh getting into a drunken shouting match, and so on and so forth. Rather than expressing any concern, many find it hilarious, basically just egging him to chug more. A lot of trolls even take it offline, approaching him in person to solely provoke a reaction on video. The classic, "Put the fries in the bag, Josh." Yeah, real funny, dude. It must be said that Josh's behavior deteriorated sharply under his toxic spotlight. By 2023, nearly every TikTok he posted showed him bleary-eyed in his signature sea captain's hat, openly chugging vodka, beer, wine, whatever alcohol he could get his hands on. He started blacking out regularly. He'd wake up on trains not knowing where he was. In one video, he's so inebriated he urinates on himself while he's passed out. Just fodder for endless mockery on Reddit. He went viral for some other troubling incidents too. In a now infamous clip, Josh stomps on a live fish that someone had bizarrely gifted him as a prank, laughing while doing it too. The public outrage was immediate. He faced a massive backlash for animal cruelty. Josh apologized saying, "Okay, I'm sorry about the fish, it was wrong," but that apology was mostly ignored or disregarded, with some suspecting that he only apologized to try to get unbanned. In other cases, he's been caught on video ranting and using racial slurs, behavior that should have serious consequences. But online spectators oddly treat these incidents like part of the show, more clips to catalog under the Lolcow lore. What's often missed in these conversations is how this behavior was shaped. It's by the audience and by the vacuum of any real support. This is someone who once had structure and supervision under his grandparents in school, but once becoming an adult and entering the public eye, was swept into an exploitative feedback loop of reinforcement. Without a strong social network to guide or protect him, his maladaptive behaviors were consistently rewarded with attention and novelty. If Josh hadn't become internet famous, he likely would have slipped through the cracks of society, quietly struggling with addiction, mental health, and grief and obscurity. Instead, he became a sideshow attraction, spiraling for the amusement of millions. His grandparents will eventually pass away if they haven't already, and if the internet continues treating him like a cautionary tale instead of a person, there's gonna be no one left to catch him when he falls. Nobody online should be holding Josh accountable for the behavior that they helped manufacture. By early this year, the situation had hit a new low. During a chaotic trip to Japan, bankrolled by donations from his so-called fans, Josh had a very public breakdown in Tokyo, where he was screaming in the streets until Japanese police detained him for causing a disturbance. Footage of Josh's Tokyo meltdown immediately made the rounds on TMZ and Twitter, alternately treated as a comedy and a tragedy. It was the culmination of a downward spiral that the internet at large helped fuel and continues to fuel. What started as a young autistic man joyfully exploring his city turned into a grim spectacle of alcoholism, public humiliation, and while Josh should be held accountable and responsible for his own offensive actions, one can't ignore the environment that encouraged his worst tendencies for entertainment. Another upsetting example is Daniel Larson, a TikTok personality who became a full-blown Lolcow case. Daniel's background is already tragic. He's on the autism spectrum and has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and for years he's also been essentially homeless. In short, he was an extremely vulnerable person even before internet fame. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Daniel began posting bizarre and often confusing TikTok videos, where he'd sing off-key, rant nonsensically, or dance oddly in public. His content was weird, yeah, but relatively harmless. However, people online latched onto Larson as a figure of ridicule, and his 15 minutes of fame as a meme never ended. Instead of fading away, he became permanent prey for trolls who realized they could easily manipulate him. It soon came to light that Daniel had a very troubled past. People on the internet soon dug up an old video of Daniel as a child in a treatment center, a facility for children who had suffered severe abuse and trauma. In that footage, young Daniel's behavior clearly showed he had serious developmental issues and emotional scars. We have failed people like this as a society. Rather than having support as adults, they slip through the cracks and get treated as subhuman. Any compassionate observer would recognize this was a person who needed professional help and structure, not torment. Disturbingly, the trolls did the exact opposite. Knowing how deeply troubled he was, they saw it as an opportunity. Larson's enablers and so-called fans began feeding his delusions and stirring him up deliberately. Fucking monsters, in my opinion. On his TikTok lives and other platforms, people would pose as supporters while giving Daniel terrible advice or false information just to see him act out. They encourage him to engage in reckless, often illegal stunts. For example, trolls goaded Daniel into harassing strangers and causing scenes in public. He came to believe this was part of pleasing his fan base. They even worked to alienate him from real-life support. Fans would applaud when he lashed out at family members or burned bridges with anyone trying to help him. In multiple instances, online instigators intentionally triggered Daniel's psychotic symptoms. For instance, by validating his paranoid thoughts or telling him wild lies, purely to watch him have an on-camera meltdown. Those breakdowns, of course, would be screen recorded and spread as memes shortly after. It's hard to imagine a more cruel form of trolling, essentially weaponizing someone's mental illness for viral content. This campaign of provocation eventually pushed Daniel across a legal line. Egged on by some malicious fans, Daniel started to believe grandiose and delusional stories, including that he had some high-stakes mission to become a president and that he was being threatened by government entities. In mid-2023, he began posting threats that he was going to do violent things, apparently under the belief that it was necessary or that he was being instructed somehow. He posted videos ranting about plans to bomb the White House and other government buildings and threatening an FBI agent. Utterly alarming stuff. It's unclear if he truly understood what he was saying though. Schizophrenia plus the troll influence is a dangerous mix, but the threats were taken seriously by authorities. In May 2024, federal agents arrested Daniel Larson and he was charged with multiple counts related to threatening to use explosives. A judge ordered that he remain in custody pending trial, explicitly noting that Larson's mental health issues and homelessness made the situation especially volatile. The judge recognized that Daniel had no stable life and was acting out largely due to mental illness. Daniel was clearly both a victim of his circumstances and a danger because of how far things had escalated. It's important to stress that Larson is not blameless in this whole scenario. Making violent threats is a crime, and he's gotta face those consequences. But it is also painfully clear that online agitators poured gasoline on that fire. We can clearly see that his audience deliberately played into his delusions and egged him on until it went way over the edge. People who knew full well that he was schizophrenic and autistic kept winding him up for their amusement, like it was a long-term reality show, some fucked up version of The Truman Show. Some even justified it by pointing out that Daniel had exhibited inappropriate or disturbing behavior. But to whatever extent Daniel had problematic tendencies, the response of turning his life into a 24/7 circus only made everything worse. Even if he was a danger, turning him into an internet punching bag did nothing to protect anyone. It just turned serious red flags into laughing matters. No matter how reprehensible a person is, onslaughts of relentless trolling are not justice, it's just harassment, and they take away the seriousness of any actual allegations against these people by making it fodder for jokes. The Daniel Larson saga is a prime example of the mental health crisis we currently have in America. Rather than receiving the care he desperately needed, he was left to spiral on the internet until it got to a point where nobody was laughing anymore. Alrighty, no discussion of Lolcows would be complete without Christine Weston Chandler, better known on the internet as Chris Chan. Christine is perhaps the most infamous Lolcow in internet history, an individual so heavily trolled and documented that some have called her one of the most documented people in existence. Her story is so long and tragic, but a brief overview shows just how far this Lolcow phenomenon has gone. Christine, who is autistic and also identifies as a transgender woman, first became known to the internet forums in the late 2000s due to her eccentric homemade comics about Sonichu, Pikachu and Sonic mashed up. She was originally a small-time creator posting cringy content, but unfortunately, sites like 4chan and Encyclopedia Dramatica picked up on her as an object of ridicule. This was essentially the birth of the term Lolcow. In 2009, a forum called the CWC Wiki was launched specifically to catalog every little detail of Christine's online life. Users on the wiki obsessively archived every drawing, video, blog post, tweet, or purchase that Chris Chan ever made, and it wasn't just passive archiving either. These trolls actively interfered in her life. According to reports, members of that forum hacked into her accounts, leaked personal emails and documents, and even stalked her in real life to snap candid photos and recordings. All of this was done to provide more milk to the Lolcow community hungry for the Chris Chan content. By 2015, the CWC Wiki had evolved into what we now know as the Kiwi Farms. Kiwi Farms broadened its scope to target any Lolcow, not just Christine, but she remains a central figure on the site. For over a decade, Christine was subjected to relentless trolling. Pranksters posed as online sweethearts to earn her trust and embarrass her. Catfishers tricked her into doing humiliating things on camera, and bullies constantly fed her false information to watch her react. Christine, due to her autism and other mental health challenges, often couldn't discern genuine friends from trolls, which only made it more tragic when they would later publish her private conversations or make mockery of her heartfelt confessions. This all reached a horrifying climax in 2021. In August of that year, an audio recording leaked online in which Christine seemingly admitted to committing incest. Specifically, she talked about a sexual encounter with her own elderly mother who suffers from dementia. The moment it hit the forum, it exploded across the internet. Within days, Christine Chandler was arrested and charged with a felony. The news made international headlines with many people asking, how did things get to this point? While ultimately, Christine is responsible for her actions. If the allegations are true, it's impossible to ignore that years of trolling set the stage for this disaster. Trolls had conditioned her to trust random internet people and do what they said. Actually, the leaked incest audio came about because a troll encouraged Christine to talk about what she'd done in a call, likely hoping to generate the most shocking content possible, with little regard to any consequences. Kiwi Farms users then disseminated that call widely, under the thin justification that they were exposing a crime, but one can't help but see the voyeuristic glee in how it was handled. As Business Insider noted, Kiwi Farms originated from Christine's saga and still devotes enormous threads to cataloging her life. In other words, it's a community about discussing eccentric people who voluntarily make fools of themselves. The Christine Chan case shows how naive that description actually is, though. She didn't volunteer to have every private moment of her life leaked and dissected by thousands of strangers. She was targeted precisely because she was an easy target, a mentally vulnerable person whose worst moments could be milked for endless laughs. It's worth noting that Christine's life has been utterly ruined by this cycle. She spent over a year in jail awaiting trial, was shunned by most of her former acquaintances, and to this day remains a figure of infamy. The trolls often rationalize their obsession as a kind of dark comedy legend. Christine was treated as a caricature, not a human being with real emotions or pain. But behind the sensational headlines is someone with autism who desperately needed help and intervention years prior. Instead, she got internet fame of the most toxic variety. Her story serves as both the origin of Lolcow culture and a giant red warning flag of how devastating that culture can be. By now, a picture should be forming of just how exploitative and cruel Lolcow culture is. In each case, we see a vulnerable person's life turned into a public circus. The psychological toll of this is hard to overstate. Targets of sustained online ridicule experience astronomical impacts on their mental health. Depression, anxiety, and psychotic breakdowns are common among Lolcows as they endure seesawing feedback. One minute, a flood of praise from fake fans, and the next minute, a wave of hate and mockery. Some of these individuals already had mental health challenges to begin with: autism, schizophrenia, past trauma, to name a few, and the constant harassment makes it exponentially worse. It's a vicious cycle. The more they're bullied, the more they act out or deteriorate, which then provides more content for the bullies to laugh at. It's a bit like watching someone slowly lose their grip on reality while a crowd cheers for more. For the troll communities and content creators, there's a disturbing lack of empathy, and I hate using that term because of our friend iDubbbz, but many justify their actions with a sense of moral correctness or righteousness. They claim they're holding the Lolcow accountable for bad behavior, or just that it's all in good fun because the person is so weird that they deserve documentation. We see it when YouTubers make a big showing of cataloging a Lolcow's every sin, as if making a supercut of someone's worst moments is a public service. Some trolls point out correctly that Lolcows have done genuinely bad things, but does that mean it's open season to hound them 24/7? There are so many people that think harassment is just fine if they believe that the person they're harassing is bad. It's a warped moral calculus. Bullying is okay as long as we really hate the target. By that logic, any flaw can make someone fair game for endless abuse, and many of these harassment peddlers are actually profiting from it. They're getting paid to harass someone different than them, and they get to feel superior while they're doing it. At the end of the day, there's nothing heroic about what these bullies do. It's not vigilante justice or exposing dangerous people. More often, it's just kicking someone who's already down. In fact, it resembles a scenario we all recognize in real life. A group of kids in school picking on a special needs kid, pulling pranks on them, laughing when they're upset, making them think like they're a part of the group so they can make fun of them without them knowing. Except now, it's amplified on a global stage, and those bullies can actually make money and clout off of it. It's telling that the term Lolcow itself comes from seeing the target as subhuman, as a farm animal to be milked. It's that exact dehumanization that makes it easier for participants to shrug off any guilt. Imagine you're walking around your city and you see a homeless person having a mental breakdown on the street. Most decent people would feel empathy, maybe call someone to help, or at least realize that this is someone in crisis and move along. Now imagine a crowd gathering around that homeless person and pointing and laughing at them, maybe even poking at them to get an angrier reaction. That sounds absolutely cruel, right? Yet, on the internet, this is exactly what happens in the Lolcow culture. And the person doing the laughing and poking are being rewarded and praised. It's upside down. The fact that this has become a genre of entertainment is a sad reflection of the current social climate. As someone who works with individuals with developmental disabilities, I can't help but see most of these Lolcow situations as aberrant failures of support. The Joshes and Daniels of the world often don't have the safety nets they need. They lack strong family guidance, professional help, or a solid friend group. In that vacuum, the internet fills the void for them, but with toxic intentions. These people are getting attention for all the wrong reasons, and they often lack the insight to recognize it. Instead of help, they get an audience urging them to go further off the rails. We also have to acknowledge a harsh truth. The internet never forgets. Once someone has been labeled a Lolcow, their worst moments are endlessly archived and replayed. Years-old mistakes or meltdowns can resurface again and again whenever a YouTuber needs content. It creates a narrative that the person is nothing but the worst moments. People are not allowed to grow or change in the eyes of the Lolcow watching community, seemingly insisting that we can't become better versions of ourselves. It's a very cynical outlook that denies basic human redemption or complexity, and for the Lolcow subject, it means any effort they make to rehabilitate or move on is often sabotaged or disbelieved by those who prefer to keep milking them. In the end, we gotta ask ourselves as consumers of online media, what are we really doing here? Laughing at some goofy viral video is one thing. We've all chuckled at someone's fail compilation or a cringe TikTok here and there. But actively following a vulnerable person's life, encouraging their worst impulses, and ridiculing them daily crosses a serious line. It stops being entertainment and becomes exploitation. Many of the YouTubers and commentators involved might not see themselves as bullies either. Some might genuinely be young and just can't fully grasp the harm they're doing. Kinda like kids making fun of a disabled person because they just don't know any better. But ignorance isn't a great excuse. Plenty of others do know exactly what they're doing and they just don't care. The paychecks or the subscribers just matter more to them. It's heartening to see some pushback emerging. There's articles and commentators starting to call out the dangers of lolcow culture, highlighting that these are real human beings being harmed. Even some former trolls have had change of heart moments, realizing how toxic it is to fuck up someone's life, and then rationalize it as okay. There's a growing awareness that we, the audience, should be critical of this kind of content rather than blindly consuming it. If a channel's whole shtick is making you laugh at someone who is clearly mentally ill or developmentally disabled, maybe we should think twice about giving them a view or a like. Ultimately, many so-called lolcows are people who obviously need intervention, not humiliation. Yeah, some of them have done offensive or odd things, but pointing and laughing at them en masse is not how society should deal with that. The internet has blurred the line between entertainment and cruelty. It's easy to get desensitized when you're watching through a screen. But if the content you're watching revolves around someone unraveling and the audience is cheering it on, that's not entertainment, it's complicity. No one deserves to have their struggles turned into a sideshow attraction. The lolcow phenomenon is a vicious cycle of bullying enabled by a structure of online platforms and the lure of internet fame. It preys on those least able to defend themselves and turns their suffering into clout for others. It's on us creators and consumers to break that cycle, to stop rewarding the bullies, to show a little more empathy, and to remember that behind every lolcow is a human being who's more than just the sum of their worst moments. It's all fun and games until you become the target. Maybe it's time to retire the milk bucket and find a better way to treat our fellow humans online. Thanks for watching.